which is the national carrier for Kenya, just like any other nation that has a national airline or aircraft that does most of these services clearly and representing the identity of the country. Now, the Kenyan Airways, or the KQ, offers the most expensive tickets according to reports that have been filed down when compared to other operators in Africa. Look and say Ethiopian Airways, look at the Uganda Airlines, look at Air Rwanda, and look at the South African Airways. So if you look at the charge, if you look at the highest average fares in terms of the domestic and international flights, Kenyan Airways comes in at number 1. Let's first have a look at this story. When we do return, we analyze more about this in comparison to other airlifts in Africa.
National carrier Kenya Airways offers the most expensive tickets when compared to other operators in Africa, charging the highest average fares on domestic and international flights. The airline, which has been making losses since 2013, has higher fares on most routes where it has competition among them. Ethiopian Airlines, South Africa Airways, and Air France, among others. According to a report by the African Competition Forum, the airline has the highest average passenger price per kilometer for all its domestic, regional, and international routes. For instance, ticket pricing data collected in October 2019 indicated that the routes for the Tanzania markets from Nairobi have higher average passenger price per kilometer than international routes. The airline's average price per ticket on the Nairobi-Johannesburg route was charged Kenyan shillings 23.8 compared to Kenyan shillings 22 charged by the South African Airways. The report noted that prices charged by the two airlines were visibly different for both economy and business class categories, with Kenya Airlines prices being 21% higher than those of South African Airlines for economy class tickets. On the Nairobi-Paris route, Kenya Airlines charged an average of Kenyan shillings 9.4 per kilometer, higher than the Kenyan shillings 8.3 charged by the Air France. It also charged more than Nairobi-Addis Ababa routes at Kenyan shillings 15.6 per kilometer, compared to Kenyan shillings 13.2 per kilometer charged by Ethiopian Airlines. The data collected from the airline websites for 12 dates between November 2019 and March 2020 on the same day to ensure consistency. COVID-19 impact. The data was collected prior the coronavirus pandemic, which hurt the line further. In March this year, Kenya Airlines announced that its pre-tax loss for the year ended December 2020 tripled to Kenyan shillings 36.57 billion as the pandemic hit demand for travel. At the time, the airline said its revenue fell by more than half during the period pushed away by the lockdown measures that led to reduced passengers.
Okay, now you've seen what is happening from the world of the aircraft business in Africa, and if we were to look at the national carrier of Kenya, the Kenyan Airways, being ranked the most expensive. This year, Kenya Airways actually recorded some huge losses to the extent that it had to actually cut the salary of the employees. These include the air hostesses, the pilots. Let's look at all those who are actually taking part in the airlines, all the employees that are employed to the airlines. And according to the situation, an official statement that came from the Kenya Airways was that these people would actually receive the same amount of money that they were receiving before the pandemic, if at all business goes back to normal. That is to the pre-pandemic levels. And that is where most of the world wants to head to. And we're clearly looking at a situation that you, as a user of the aircraft, I think most of you have also used it before. To those who have traveled to Kenya, maybe traveled overseas using African airlines, and mainly Ethiopian or Kenyan Airways that have actually stood the test of time. And of recent, the Kenyan Airways was on the verge of collapsing, and it actually came up to merge with the South African Airways to see that they remain in business, to remain active in business, and maybe for a future prospects of making sure that there is a merger of African airlines to promote maybe a continental air carrier or a continental carrier. National carrier Kenya Airways offers the most expensive tickets when compared to other operators in Africa. Look at operators like Ethiopian Airways, the operators like Uganda Airlines, look at Air Tanzania, look at Rwanda Air, and most of the different lifts out there, most of the carriers on the continent, let's say South African Airways, and most probably, because if you had to look at situations that are happening in Africa, that it is actually remaining the most expensive. And if you look at the situations that have actually affected it as an aircraft, I think this whole drama supports it, because you would agree that they feel they need to remain active in business. And by remaining active in business, they need to remain active in a way that they are going to stay afloat in the world. And staying afloat in the world means these people are supposed to stay amidst all these tough times of the pandemic, and you're supposed to see that you get more money out of the people, and the tickets have to be expensive. That is why you could see it. The airline, which has been making losses since 2013, now you can imagine, before even COVID-19, according to reports are coming out, that it has actually been getting losses since 2013. If you look at the reasons as to why most of the airlines in Africa have been collapsing, it is because of the losses. This is one of the reasons as to why that is to why the Uganda Airline is back on track, but it's actually taking a very long journey to get back to where we are, because it had already collapsed in the long run after Idi Amin Dada leaving the country. So it has always been in the situation of revival, which we've seen since 2019, and up to now it is actually now opening routes for the destinations. But one could say, look, profits are not being generated, but the airline is still active. So if you look at Kenya, 8 years down the road, they're not making anything like profits. They're only recording losses. Now, COVID comes in, they're down, and when COVID comes through, most of the businesses and most of the airlines are actually collapsing in the world, simply because of the travel restrictions that were happening for the last 18 months. And the level of travel changed greatly. For the tourists who are actually used to traveling, most of them decided to stay focused in their countries to appreciate the beauty in their country. And look and see, most of the countries with tour destinations, more so East Africa, and Kenya having been put among the red listed countries, it being the fact that the cases of COVID were increasing with a sharp increase day in, day out. This greatly affected the airline. Now, the airline, which has been making losses since 2013, has higher fares on most routes where it has competition. Among them include the Ethiopian Airlines, South African Airways, and the Air France, among others. According to a report by the African Competition Forum, ASF, the airline has the highest average passenger price per kilometer for all its domestic, regional, and international routes. Kenya Airways had also a merger with the KLM. The KLM that belongs to the Netherlands or Holland, the aircraft KLM. So this was to promote the aircraft business or airlines business and the aviation sector in general for both countries. And the merger was to help Airways, the Kenya Airways, to stay afloat in the business. But if you look at the situation, their merger expired and there was no total come back from that one. There was no more deals signed, but this time around there is only a deal with the South African Airways to see that Kenya Airways stays in business. So comparing them to other airlines in Africa, the Ethiopian Airways that has actually stayed here for quite some time, being one of Africa's strongest airways, is actually cheaper compared to the fares of Kenya Airways. For instance, ticket pricing data collected in October 2019 indicated that the routes for the Tanzania markets from Nairobi have higher average passenger price per kilometer than international routes. So you could see we are now comparing to show you the picture here, why they are saying it is quite expensive. The airline's average price per kilometer on the Nairobi-Johannesburg route was charged 23.8 Kenyan shillings compared to 22 Kenyan shillings charged by South African Airways. The report noted that prices charged by the two airlines were visibly different from both economy and business class categories, with Kenya Airways prices being 21% higher than those of South African Airways for economy class tickets. On the Nairobi-Paris route, Kenya Airways charged an average of 9.4 Kenyan shillings per kilometer, higher than 8.3 charged by higher than the 8.3 Kenyan shillings charged by Air France. It also charged more than Nairobi to Addis Ababa route at 15.6%, at 15.6 kilometer of the Kenyan shillings, compared to 13.2 Kenyan shillings per kilometer charged by Ethiopian Airlines. The data, if you look at the situation, the data was collected from airline websites for 12 dates between November 2019 and March 2020 on the same day to ensure consistency. COVID-19 impact, the data was collected prior to the coronavirus pandemic, which had the airline further. So since 2013, the airline has not been making profits. And if it has not been making profits, one would look at the COVID-19 as one of the major reasons as to why most of the businesses collapsed. But this time around, Kenya Airways was found in a situation where it was not recording any profits whatsoever. And now COVID-19 just came to add salt onto the wounds. Just like Omutwana government, kakati oinebwa nebaja ne bakwongeramu omunyo mu bwere ne bongeramu oba ne bongera okulinyiga ne bongera okutekamu ekinnya mu bwere to just dig deeper. Okuva 2013 Kenya Airways company eno y'ennyonyi ebadde tekola ssente oba ebadde ekola ssente naye nga tewali magoba. So in simple terms, sente zebadde ekola zibanga ezibadde takolirako ddala. Kati ate wetwatuka mu 2019 tuyingidde 2020 kirwadde kirumiima mawuggwe ne kiyingirawo ekya COVID ne kikosa entambula z'ennyonyi mu nsi yonna olw'ensonga nti kampani zino zaali tezikyakola, abantu baali tebakyatambula, tebakyava mu nsi zaabwe tugambe genda mu nsi ndala olw'ensonga nti vaccine tezaaliwo. COVID yali ayisizza bubi ekonomi z'ensi ng'abantu abasinga bonna bali locked up mu nsi zaabwe. The only people allowed to move beebo ba essentials. So ogenda olaba nga airports ezisinga zaali zilimitinga abayingira nga bataddewo dda n'ensi ezitalina kukkirizibwa yingira mu nsi zaabwe ng'omuntu bamanya nti oba ovamu eno ensi ate otunulira ensi nga Kenya ezimu ku ezo ensi ezaali zirina abalwadde abasinga nga beeyongera bakakendeera wano jjojuzi era bwe bakenderedde ddala gavumenti nejjawo ne kafyu kwegamba totally ne liftinga lockdown yaabwe. Naye wotunulira ku nsonga ezigenda mu maaso mu Kenya naddala ku aircraft business naddala mu nsonga y'ebidduka oba mu aviation sector tugambe mu byennyonyi eno national carrier yaabwe nti nga olaba nti ffe yaffe eri mu process ya rejuvenation kale twagidaabuluzza Uganda Airlines ekomyewo mu business naye ya Kenya eri ku njegoyego y'okuvaawo olw'ensonga nti egezezzaako mu ngeri yonna yalina manja yalina partnership gye yateekawo ne KLM. That is one of most of the successful airlines in the European continent. Eyo yaggwawo kati eyinawo manja endala gye yafunye partnership oba enkolagana ey'enjawulo ne South African Airways okulaba nga basharinga routes n'okulaba nga balina engeri gye bakwasaganyamu mu ngeri y'ennyonyi mu mbeera ey'okudduganya embeera y'ennyonyi mu nsi oba naddala ku lukalu olwa Africa wano. Naye okusinziira mu statistics eziraga Kenya Airways nno eno ye kampani y'ennyonyi esinga okukyajinga sente nyingi. Tinga wogezaageranya ku companies nga Ethiopia, South Africa ez'amaanyi ku lukalu lwa Africa wano, Air France nayo ng'ogigasseeko ojja kwekanga nga Kenya Airways eno ekyajingo zisinga newankubadde era routes zezimu ne destination bwe ziba zezimu. Omuntu ayinza okwebuuza oba services ez'enjawulo naye waayitomanya naye woogeraageranyamu ku Ethiopia ne Kenya ojja kwekanga Ethiopian Airways eno nno erabika y'amaanyiko olw'ensonga ku destinations zeekola n'okusinziira ku routes ez'amaanyi zeetuukiriza ne services ez'amaanyi era n'ebbanga Ethiopian Airways lyemaze ku lukalu lwa Africa n'okulaba ng'etambuza essaabaaza abantu mu njegoyego z'ebibuga ebyenjawulo kusinziira ku lukalu lwa Bulaaya n'okutambula mu nsi yonna. Kati katutunuulire ekintu ekigenda maaso. In March this year, Kenya Airways announced that its pre-tax loss for the year ended December 2020 tripled to 36.57 billion Kenyan shillings. As the pandemic hit demand for travel, at the time, the airline said its revenue fell by more than half during the period, pushed by the lockdown measures that led to reduced passengers. So if you're to look at why the airlines has actually had a sharp decline and a sharp increase in the losses accumulated, is because of the pandemic. So between 2013 to now, they're actually having a decline because the passengers are few. Not only are they few, they have reduced the salary of their employees. So the air hostesses or the cabin crew have their salaries decreased, and they will only be increased if at all business goes back to the pre-pandemic levels. That is according to official statements coming in from Kenya Airways. But still, one would ask is, when will this happen? Because signs, I wouldn't want to be a predictor, but if you look at the signs that are happening, Kenya Airways still needs very huge facilitation, mainly, if possible, from the government of Kenya to help them out amidst these trying times of the pandemic before the national career collapses, because that will be a very huge worry. It is one of the strongest air carriers on the continent and greatly playing a very big part in the aviation sector on the African continent. And if you look at the Uganda Airlines, we are also looking up to the Kenya Airways and to see that we also reach out to the destinations and the routes that they are reaching out. Maybe, and just maybe, we can actually be on the level of the Kenyan Airways. But still, Kenya Airways is being ranked as the most expensive aircraft carrier on the continent amongst all the aircraft in the aircraft business in Africa. So away from that, brings us to the end of our discussion and our topical analysis of the fact that Kenya Airways is in the news, but this time around as one of the most expensive. But if you follow up on some of the cases that have been happening, the level at which it has actually been incurring losses is worrying, and that is one of the reasons as to why one would say it needs facilitation from the government, support from the government. I'm Jordan Paul Sonko. This is Smart Means Business. We are driving your businesses, and for all of you who have been joining us, thank you very much, and thank you for making it a deal. You say yes, it's Smart Means Business is where you get your latest from all angles of the business world, from Uganda, the local community, trader communities, the corporate world, as well as the international scene. Coming up next is Yugi Tukole with Fred Makubia to give you more of the details happening from the world of business, from the commodities and the forex updates as well. This is Smart 24 TV.
Ng'ekitongole ekya Uganda Revenue Authority kikyagendera ddala maaso okubangula bannamakolero n'abannayuganda okwongera okusasula omusolo mu kampeyini gye bayise bomba ya business. Essira ku luno balitadde ku by'amayumba n'engeri gye bayinza okulaakulanyamu omulimu guno. Sudil Ruparelia ono nga ye MD wa Ruparelia Group of Companies agamba nti okweyongera kw'abantu kulina ky'amaanyi kye kukola ku nkulaakulana y'omulimu gw'amayumba guno.
Is that the population of the country is growing, and when the population of Uganda grows, there's always going to be a demand in every sector, whether it is farming land, whether it is low-cost housing, urban developments, industrial developments, office parks, industrial parks. So the expansion of real estate is going to keep growing. So as long as you're confident in the area you are in and what is the future of your local authorities, bearing that in mind, I personally think there's still a huge prospect of growth in real estate in every town of Uganda. If you can see the decentralizing about 15 years ago, how all these small towns are now grown into beautiful big cities around Kampala. Kampala is not the only place now. You go to Masaka, you go to Barara, you go to Mbale, Arua, Gulu, everywhere they've actually created huge communities which are self-sufficient in terms of service providers. So the growth is there in every region of Uganda today. So I would, you know, if I was ready to invest in real estate, go for it. There's nothing wrong.
Sudil agamba nti naye bw'obanga onateeka ssente mulimu guno ekifo w'otadde business obanga akeedi wakola ky'amaanyi nnyo nnyini ddala.
Right? And the most important thing in any of this investment, your first thing the Judy has missed out is called location, location, location. And that if you go to any estate agent, it's the first thing they'll tell you. Investment in real estate again is location, location, location. Plan your location right. If it's for retail, it must be in the right location. If it's for arcades, it's in the right location. For office block is the right location. For industrial warehousing and industrial park is right location.
Ezimu ku nsonga ezisinga okunyigiriza enkulaakulana y'eggwanga kati y'engeri gye tuteekerateekeramu ebitundu eby'enjawulo. Kino Judith kyagamba nti okuteekerateekera kikulu nnyo mulimu guno.
Is critical and it has an impact on the price of land, number one, before you buy it, and I'll approach that from a different perspective. If a piece of land does not have development approval or planning approval, then it will be, you can acquire it slightly cheaper than one that has. Okay? Buying a plot of land that has planning approval on it for a specified user type, okay, adds value onto that piece of land, because what it means is as a developer you can just come, buy the title or buy the land, the interest in the property, and you proceed to develop immediately. You'll have done away with that, you know, part of the pre-purchase stage where you have to go and find out what can I build, what can I not build. It will be very clear if you have planning permission on that. On the other hand, land which is unplanned is mainly within high density population areas, which is the urban areas. And it tends to be extremely expensive because as you go to acquire it, before you develop it, you have to first clear the squatters. Now you're paying that on top of the price that you're paying for the plot of land.
Otasobola kwogera ku mulimu gwonna mu Uganda n'otayogera ku nsonga y'emisolo. Shari omukugu ku nsonga z'ebyamayumba agamba nti emisolo egibateekebwako nyingi nnyo.
Sector, we feel we are overtaxed. We feel the taxes are many. They are numerous, and then we feel that you're concentrating on the few on the few developers who have property. We feel like it's like there's some mistrust or something with the developers, and yet we are thinking that there's a wider base that you can fish and get that tax. So we are uncomfortable with it, yes. Combine them as a whole. We have rental, we have property tax, we have value-added tax, we have income tax, we have VAT, we have withholding. There are many.
Kwebiha Muzamiru, omwogezi wa Kampala Arcades Advocacy Forum, mu bufuutifuuti gye tuyita kafo, ye agamba nti abakungu abakola amateeka gano ag'emisolo bagakola nga tebamanyi kiri ku ttaka abasuubuzi gye bawangaalira. Ate kye balina okumanya nti buli bw'oyongera emisolo ku bannannyini bizimbe, obuzibu bumaliriza nga buzze kubapangisa.
For reason I'm very sorry ogamba nti omuntu ali mu parliament ebintu ebimu oluusi babeera tebabitegeera. Bo bali bulungi nti batuula ne bongeza emisaala gyabwe, bali mu comfort zone, ate balina a lot of privileges. MP bw'alwala, by the way, balina budget number nti asobola ogenda India ne bamu operatinga and all that ne bamuwa obujjanjabi. But ngaffe ababuwi b'omusolo it's really very very bad. Tebali reasonable enough. Nze kyova olaba ngamba abantu nti abakola policies zino naddala ku by'emisolo eventually tebamanyi kigenda mu maaso kubanga right now tuli bubi nnyo tubadde mu covid rent mwennyini asasula 30% rental income tax ate again omwongeddeko 18% naye gwolooza landlord yamusasula ekituufu kyennyini rent ono asasulwa mupangisa so therefore gwe bwoba ogamba nti ng'ensi oyagala abantu babeere n'obulamu obulungi obweyagaza and then a tenant die muntu probably ayandibadde naye ayagala ennyumba that means is struggling okulaba nga going to another level naye level eyo ekyambulemye okugira naye ate gwonyigiriza kuba once you increase any tax obligation pusinga oteeka hard tax obligation oba emisolo ku landlord manya agenda zitransferinga ku banaku
kusinziira kwa ripoota omulimu gw'okuzimba guleeta ebitundu bina